Welcome to the Keeping IT Real podcast. This podcast features honest and transparent conversations about what it takes to manage corporate technology and expenses today. Each episode, listen to true and personal stories from IT professionals who are working hard to make sure their business stays connected and competitive. I'm your host, Jethro Castillo, and let's meet our next guest.
Today, I am joined by Robert Sheesley, the CIO at Wrench Group, a national leader in home repair and maintenance. Robert is an incredible IT leader with decades of experience and success. This is actually Robert's second time on the podcast, his first episode going live back in February. It was an excellent conversation, so I'm excited to check in half a year later. Robert, it's good to have you back.
Jethro, it's good to be back. Appreciate the invitation to join you today.
As I said earlier, this is your second time back, so for anyone who wants to learn about his backstory, please check out the first episode. But like I said, I'm excited to just jump in and talk. So what's new? What's happening in your world over the last 6 months?
The first part of the year, thanks for the opportunity. The first part of the year, we have not been bored. It's been quite busy. I managed to grow the team for the first year, I think, since I became CIO of Wrench Group back in March of 2018. This is the first year that we've actually fulfilled all of our talent search and recruiting and hiring in Q1. So, coming out of budget season, typically September, October of the previous year, in the past, it's taken us a little bit longer to fulfill all of those full-time equivalent employee resource requisitions. And we've got some great new partners. I say new, we've been working with them for a few years, Insight Global being one of them, also part of the Leonard Green and Partners family. But they've been a huge asset to us in helping recruit and hire talent. So we've got a full suite of IT competency leaders now. We've really made progress in the area of data privacy, protection, and compliance with Piper Treese-Angert, who I worked with previously at University of Pittsburgh Medical Center and Milan, and hired her on a little over a year ago to lead our data privacy and compliance group. And she's been a tremendous asset to us. And Greg Frieda, who was hired in as our lead enterprise architect, has moved around in a couple of leadership roles and has landed leading our enterprise applications group along with enterprise architecture. And we have a new innovation committee that we planted this year, and he's leading the innovation competency as well. So pretty exciting stuff happening. We're doing a little bit of a discovery phase and experimentation with AI and the application of AI specifically in the area of help desk triage and resolution, as well as some consumer-facing technologies and platforms.
Oh, a lot can happen in 6 months, clearly.
Yes, we don't let a whole lot of grass grow under our feet. We're a pretty fast-moving organization, not just in the IT space, but in marketing. And our acquisition train has slowed down a little bit. That has been by design. We invested in what I previously may have referred to as greenfield plants. So planning a business and growing a business in a metropolitan area that we otherwise didn't have a presence. And we do that in two ways. We have a tethered greenfield, which is a brand geographically nearby. And we just open a brand of that same name in a geography or a metropolitan area, like we did in Nashville with Coolray, which is a very successful location and brand in the Atlanta market. And then there's an untethered greenfield model where we actually create a brand name, and then we bring some expertise from our other locations to help build that brand within a community. And we just did that in Oklahoma City. So yeah, it's I think leading IT information and technology at Wrench Group has been such I'm so grateful for the experience and the colleagues that I work with. Megan McNally, notably our chief marketing officer, who I have a great relationship. And I tell people that on other podcasts or other interviews that I do, and they're like, wait a minute. You and the CMO actually like each other? You work together? And yes, I've been in companies where marketing and IT just did not, for whatever reason, didn't find their happy place together. But since Megan landed at Wrench Group about 6 months after I joined, we've been in lockstep for the most part, not only on the strategy, but on our priorities as we build technology solutions, as we onboard technology solutions to serve the marketing stakeholder community at Wrench.
Yeah, you said you've been there since 2018, correct?
Yes.
I would say the last 6 years, IT has changed and evolved quite a lot, and it's also stayed the same in other regards. What has how has your experience at Wrench Group sort of evolved over the years from 2018 to now, especially with COVID happening in the middle and generative AI happening?
Yes,
here?
that's a wonderful question. And when you rewind the 6 years, we always knew that we wanted a cloud-based platform model for not only our infrastructure, but for our key operating systems. So we partnered with a number of SaaS platform providers, ServiceTitan, Intact, which is a Sage product, and others. And that has been a good model for us. In terms of what has changed, I think automation, the utilization and application of machine learning for business intelligence and data engineering, automation from an RPA perspective, robotic process automation, as well as utilizing what we like is our Microsoft Azure platform, using Databricks on the data engineering and BI side, Microsoft Power BI for our reporting. So I think the integration of all of these technologies has become, I don't want to say easier, but it's given us an opportunity to build a roadmap, an architectural roadmap for our organization. So, and I would stop short of saying it's plug and play, but it gives us the opportunity to evaluate new technologies and then determine relatively quickly whether or not, from an architecture perspective, those new technologies, those new platforms are going to fit, right, with our current technology ecosystem. And part and parcel, that's bringing Greg Treaty in a few years ago and his ability and skills in the area of driving architectural conversations, not just with the IT community, but with the business community. We've really moved the needle in terms of bringing the concept of business architecture into the organization and then actually applying it, evaluating technology systems, platforms based on not necessarily what the functional aspects of the technology or systems is, but the capabilities that we want to improve on or introduce to the organization.
Oh, I feel like that's very, very, very valuable to an organization to be able to, especially with things moving so fast nowadays, right? To be able to know what you have, and you use the phrase plug and play, and it might not exactly be that, but that's the speed at which you can adapt is not something that's really a part of every single organization. So the fact that that's part of yours is very fascinating to hear, at least.
Indeed, and I think this idea of business capability models is important to us. And I've built them. I've led the building of them. I've led the use of them in other organizations like Mylan when I ran enterprise architecture there. And we've introduced that into our organization. We have a functioning, full, built out marketing capability model for our organization. So when you think about what you pick and choose as your priorities to spend time on from an investment perspective, whether it's a business or an IT investment, our ability to look at that business capability model, work with our CMO and her leadership team to ask and answer the question, where are the areas that we need to improve relative to our strategic objectives? And that helps us set our priorities. In all honesty, our commitment to investing in certain areas of capability maturity. And I think the ability of our organization to embrace that idea, this whole concept of business capability model, business capability heat map, and aligning existing and new technology against the highest priority capabilities for maturity, has been a game changer for us. I may have mentioned this in our last discussion. A few Januaries ago, I was in Orlando and I heard Lee Cockrell speak, from a former SVP at Disney. And he said something that has just stuck with me. And I've used it probably more than once, certainly more than a dozen times. But the biggest challenge business has today is clarity of expectation. And if you can solve for that within your own organization in terms of what is IT working on, right? What should IT be working on to meet the expectations of the business stakeholder? It's all about prioritization. And how do you get to prioritization? Well, you look at that business capability model, the heat map, and you work with your business constituents to identify for lack of a better phrase, the biggest bang for the buck. Where's the greatest value in maturing the capability in this space or this space or this space?
You make it sound simple, and maybe it is, but it's definitely one of the biggest pain points of a lot of IT departments is that prioritization and aligning with the business, right? So you shook your head when I said simple, so that's a good sign for the next question, I guess. And you kind of touched upon it, talked about it, but walk me through exactly how you and your team and your business at large actually figure out what is the most top of mind thing for you guys to address in this quarter, the next quarter, moving forward, to ensure you're in lockstep with the team and achieving business.
Indeed.
objectives.
Yeah, it isn't simple, and by no means are we perfect. But I will say that all of our C-suite, from our CMO, who I mentioned, Megan McNally, to our CFO, CEO, COO, I will say the one thing that we do well is once we see things going off track or there's evidence of misalignment, we get back together and realign. So a few years ago, Ken Haynes, our CEO, published a strategic direction document. And because of my experience in building strategy maps, Kaplan and Nortland model, I reverse engineered what I saw in that strategic document in video that he, published to the community, the entire employee community. And I created a strategy map, a business strategy map for Wrench Group. And then I played that back to our C-suite and said, how close am I in capturing this? It took a few conversations and a few formats to play that back, consumable and referenceable and reviewable. But we finally landed on a strategy map based on 4 swim lanes of strategic value: financial, customer, internal operations, and learning and growth, or people, which follows the Kaplan-Norton model. And we align all of our in-flight and any new initiatives based on traceability and reference to those business strategies. From that business strategy map, I in turn created an IT strategy map. So complementary to the business strategy map, so that we had a view of what is our IT strategy in those 4 same swim lanes of strategic value. And so to answer your question about how do you stay on track, how do you prioritize and make sure that the things that IT is working on are the most valuable or perceived to be the most valuable, we always look at the strategy map and the strategic objectives that we're serving based on the perceived value that a particular initiative, system, deployment is going to introduce to the organization. We just recently started to do quarterly planning, IT. So one of the other new things since perhaps we last talked is we created an enterprise program management office. And more recently, we hired Melinda Maxwell to lead that, as well as our M&A function. And part of that EPMO is to have now quarterly planning with IT and the business stakeholder community to review all of our project portfolio management inventory to make sure that our priorities are accurate and that the allocation of resource capacity based on those priorities is agreeable amongst the C-suite in terms of trade-offs, right? If you've got a four-quarter or more runway to deliver a particular system or solution, and it's one of the top 10 priorities, that likely isn't going to be affected by anything new that surfaces. And new things surface all the time. New ideas. As I mentioned, we spun up this innovation committee. We've got things coming out of that committee, as you can imagine, wanting resources and wanting attention, but something of a shorter time frame that may have less value, but is more easily attainable, could potentially get prioritized over something that has a longer runway and perceived to have more value. So it's there's a delicate balance there that we consistently water and feed so that directionally we're correct, and more specifically, somewhere in the area of 70 to 90% correct. You're never perfect. We always say that we want to focus our attention on activity and change initiatives that don't spit in the face of this idea of good being the enemy of, or perfect being the enemy of good, right? If we continue to strive to be perfect, we'll probably never get there.
Do you allow, because obviously you set these priorities and these strategies, you have that long-term one, you have other goals. Do you allow for that flexibility for something to pop up and have a team or a group of your team quickly adjust and move to that? How do you address things that come up last second, especially when you have a plan that's already set in stone?
Yeah, that's a great question because it does happen. And, we do have a steering committee that we, continually engage in conversation about some of the things that come up. And a lot of our C-suite is part of that steering committee. Admittedly, we're still growing in maturity on our ability to apply demand and capacity management when it comes to a very finite set of resources, both internally and externally. And so when new things surface, we immediately put it in front of that committee and say, okay, recognize there's a want here. It has senior level, executive level support for attention. Where does it fall? Right? Tell us where it falls without any other metadata, right? If you evaluate it in terms of value and time for delivery, let's start there. Then we'll go back and look at the resource allocation. Who do we need to move from something to this to deliver it in the time frame that you say you want it delivered? And then report back what the impact of that is. So there are some things that are probably going to get delayed if something new surfaces, but the perception or the direction is that this new thing that surfaced has a high value component to it, then yes, we'll move resources around. And our IT team has been incredible in being nimble like that, where there isn't a whole lot of, they understand that the world that we're in, right? They understand the competitive nature, especially now in the home services industry, as new consolidators have grown over the past 3 or 4 or 5 years, quite honestly, mimicking and imitating the Wrench Group model of consolidating strong businesses to provide shared services to those businesses and grow them at an accelerated pace.
I guess that is the name of the game of priorities is trade-offs, opportunity cost, and determining what things have more value than others in order for adjustments to be made. But it feels like it requires a lot of moving parts. It requires a lot of communication and alignment.
Yes.
And I see where the imperfections can come into play here.
Yeah, and sure. I don't want to make it sound like a mathematical formula because there's certainly a lot of political navigation that needs to occur, relationship navigation with senior leaders. But what we're trying to eliminate is this concept of the squeaky wheel getting the grease, right? I've been in organizations in the past where the most bold, loudest, aggressive leader in the organization typically got what he or she wanted in terms of attention, time, resources, etc. We're trying to apply more science than art to that so that everyone is operating under the same playbook, if you will. And this idea of value, time, alignment with strategic objectives, those things are important now versus, someone using political or relational strength to get something to be worked on versus something else, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Do you find that with the strategic sort of objectives in place, do you find less conflict of priorities amongst teams? And if those arise, is that just a conversation away from a solution?
Yes, no. It's typically more than one conversation away to a solution. But again, what we're trying to eliminate is the subjective nature of the passion behind a particular pet initiative. And, we're not always right. But if you can agree on, are we strategically aligned? Do we have a good sense of what the value of this thing is once it's delivered? And another metadata point that we've introduced is time to value. So after it's delivered, whatever the solution is, or system or technology, how much time from the time of delivery until the time that you start to achieve the value, you can start recording the benefits, right? That's important to know too, because if the benefit stream is 12 months out, something that has a much shorter runway to tangible benefits, depending on where we're at in our performance life cycle too. How did we do in first and second quarter? What's most important to us now? Is it revenue growth, top line, bottom line? Is it cost containment? Where is our priority? Our strategic objectives may not change, but the timeliness and conditions of the moment may dictate this priority is now 3, where it was once 12, and this priority is now 20, where it was once 6. And so now that we have a leader, a competent and experienced leader like Melinda in place to drive our portfolio management function, which is relatively new, I'm excited about what the future holds. We have a budget cycle coming up here in September and October. And to say I'm excited about entering into those conversations may be slightly aggressive, but they're always, we're in a better position today than we were a year ago to have those budget conversations about where the most impactful investments will be for us in 2025, 2026.
Yeah, I realize we're, at least from my point of view, we're talking a lot in terms of business in general. How exactly, and so we're talking about strategic initiatives in general, how exactly is IT supporting Wrench Group and your business, specifically home repair and maintenance? What are those strategic objectives and how is IT helping? Is it more helping the business, or are there initiatives that help the customers and the users and the consumers you're serving?
Absolutely. I mean, from a financial perspective, grow revenue, grow EBITDA are the two primary strategic objectives. But once you get to the customer swim lane, again, back to the Kaplan and Nortland model, market expansion is one of our strategic objectives. Customer experience, moving the needle on the maturity of the customer experience, meeting the customer where they're at, right? We've got a new generations plural of homeowners, coming into the market. And the majority of those new generation homeowners don't want to have a conversation on the phone about the need for an HVAC technician, plumber, electrician, or a request to have an evaluation of their current home system to determine whether or not they need something new. They want to schedule their appointments here and in many different ways, right? Web, smartphone oriented, website, customer portal, right? That you can access from your phone, chatbot, possibly. For the longest time, I was, we were talking about travel earlier before we started the interview. We travel fairly frequently internationally, my wife and I. And a few years back, maybe a year back, maybe 18 months, she encouraged me to try the Delta Airlines chat feature. Because when you call Delta now, at least from the Diamond number, it asks you if you want to enter into a chat rather than wait on hold. Mm-hmm. And I would always hit no, I want to talk to a human. I've got, I don't know, maybe I'm high maintenance. I don't know. And my wife was, you need to try this, because she had done it successfully. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it a try. So I hit the option to chat, and I got immediately a text message saying, click here to chat with an agent. And I did. And I probably reduced the amount of time associated with that ask, that request, by half by selecting the chat. So if the conversation was going to be 20 minutes, I got it done in 10, or 10 minutes, I got it done in 5. So although I was very skeptical to try that, my wife encouraged me again and again and again. And finally, I may have tried it just so that she would stop talking to me about it. And then it worked. And so we want to be meeting our customer where they are at in terms of preference and communication. And then we also are implementing new and more creative ways to get feedback from the customer, right? So, send an email with a survey. There's got to be some, what's in it for me feature to that, right? $5 coupon or something like that. And now we're actually sending surveys via text message, click here. And it's really, really important that the surveys are not verbose and don't take 30 minutes of your time. You got to hit the high points, right? And so, we have a lot of initiatives in play that are focused on market expansion, customer experience, and making sure our customer knows that we are a multi-trade business. We don't just do plumbing. We don't just do electrical. Mm-hmm. And so there is a very low percentage of our total customer base that is a multi-trade buyer. And early this year, we launched a number of initiatives to change that. And it's been pretty successful thus far.
Obviously, this is a lot of marketing, right? So how and you said you and the CMO are in lockstep and have a really good relationship. How does IT, you mentioned, the smartphone website sort of capability. What are other ways that you are assisting the marketing team with marketing expansion and helping current customers and prospects understand that you guys are a multi-trade organization?
So 5 years ago, Megan and I hosted a offsite workshop, and that was the launch of our digital transformation strategy and roadmap. And then fast forward 2 years later, we selected Adobe Experience Manager, Adobe Cloud, as our standard in terms of marketing automation capabilities. And so one of the other ways is making sure that the data that we are providing the Adobe platform from our data lake or Azure data lake is of high quality, has an element of normalization because we have 28 brands across many, many geographies across the United States. So as you can imagine, when you acquire these companies, even though they may be using the same system, and not all of them are, because we migrate them to our standard core operating system, the data doesn't always look the same. Sometimes it looks like an apple, sometimes it looks like a peach, sometimes it looks like an avocado. And so we entered into a enterprise information management initiative back in June of 2019 that has evolved to a strategic data governance and operational data governance competency, where we are consistently watering and feeding our data quality and our data normalization so that the data we're providing this Adobe platform is relevant and timely. Megan likes to use the term velocity. What's the velocity of data that I can get from a new acquisition or something new that gets introduced into our operating system platform, collecting new data or generating data from data, if you will. And so, velocity is really important to her and her marketing team. Accuracy obviously is really important. And so the better we can do those things as an IT organization, and we brought Greg Picozzi in nearly a year ago to lead our information management and analytics team. And he's responsible for literally producing all the data, consolidating all the data, normalizing all the data to feed that Adobe engine. That is of paramount importance to Megan and her team and her marketing objectives, not only for the year, but for the remainder of our digital transformation journey.
No, it's really awesome to hear how IT can really be a champion for so many different aspects of the business. I think this is the first time that I've talked to somebody on this podcast, and we've talked about how, I'm on the marketing team, right? This is the podcast is a marketing endeavor. Sure. And so just to hear the very integral way that you support the team, the customers as well, and then also just every other part of the business that we didn't really touch on. Well, I guess the finance team as well. The whole business. I think it's really cool to actually hear that IT is no longer just behind the curtain. It's crucial to ensure the success of the organization. And that's just really awesome to kind of hear you talk about it in the details. So I really appreciate you sharing.
Yeah, we don't want to be order takers. We don't want to be the McDonald's drive-through. Do what fries with, right? We want to be part of the plan, right? We want to be at the table with the business stakeholder when they're talking about their strategic business objectives. And we want to get our wheels turning on how technology can enable those objectives, serve those objectives, and again, move the needle on the maturity of the business capabilities that they want to grow and evolve to support their strategic objectives. Now, listen, it's not perfect. I mentioned, my close relationship with Megan and our kind of unified perspective on what we want to get accomplished. We have our moments, we're human, right? But I know that she's committed to finding collaboration in all that we do. And I'm committed to, listen, we serve the business community. That's what we do. Don't want to be an order taker, want to be part of your strategic conversations. But at the end of the day, if I think, campaign gold model is a higher priority than customer data platform, and Megan thinks customer data platform is a higher priority than campaign gold model, I will, and I feel strongly about that, I will attempt to influence her otherwise. But if I can't, at the end of the day, she's the business stakeholder. So, I walk away from that conversation with adopting her perspective because she's held accountable for the marketing metrics. I'm held accountable for the IT technology metrics, and our competency areas serve marketing, finance, HR, operations. And so we have a customer within the customer.
Yeah. No, I hear you. You said not everything's perfect. We're human. And that's, absolutely the name of the game. I say that phrase too much, which is why I paused to try to figure out a different phrase, but I couldn't think of anything at the top of my head. So I'm going to work on that after this and go synonym for name of the game. If clearly things aren't perfect and nothing ever is, and that's a good thing, I would say. That being said, then what are some of the biggest challenges you're facing in your role or your team is facing right now? And how are you guys looking to tackle it? Unless, of course, it is all smooth sailing from here on out, always.
Now, there'll be some rough waters ahead, I'm sure. As I said, we just stood up this whole idea of quarterly planning and really scrutinizing our project portfolio management inventory relative to priority. But again, I think the collegial nature of our C-suite is one of our greatest advantages. The management team is just as solid as any I've ever been a part of. And, that's testimony to Ken Hain's leadership. Some of the challenges, I think, resource constraints, right? We only have so many internal resources. We've got to be cognizant of the fact that none of the corporate employees are in revenue generating roles. And so I don't want to go so far as to say we're cost centers, because I think we add value that produces revenue, produces market share, produces market expansion, produces new customers. But I think one of the things that isn't perfect in our world is our ratio of IT employee to total population of employees in the organization. So we gotta be very discreet and specific about where our attention needs to be. As a part of the solution to that, or part of the contribution to maybe leveling that out a little bit, is the strong partnerships we have with third parties. Archon in Chicago, as an example, provides all of our infrastructure as a service in the cloud. They manage our help desk. They manage our SOC. They're leaning in as we enter into a new renewal with them to make some investments in some of the areas that we want to move the needle, such as robotic process automation. I think they're probably going to have a role in helping us stand up our data classification and document management program, which is a 12-month plus program that's timely for us as we turn the corner on our growth. So I think leaning on some of our third parties and having conversations with potential new third parties in the area of affinity marketing, in the area of, we've got something exciting on the horizon, and I don't want to share too much because we really don't have the contracts in place right now. We just got some preliminary conversations going on based on a mutual non-disclosure agreement. But there's some exciting things that we're going to be doing with a partner to expand our presence in certain communities in the geographic markets that we serve. And maybe if we agree to have a part 3 of this conversation in 6 to 12 months, I'll be able to share more about that. And there'll be a huge technology component to that. So excited about that.
Hey, I will always welcome you back. If I have a couple more questions for you on that note, if you could, you mentioned third parties too, but if you could increase your bench strength, what gaps would you immediately fill that you don't have the time or capacity to address at this point in time?
Yes, I would look closely at quality assurance, quality control. We have that outsourced right now. Not a bad thing. But anytime you outsource something that is sustainable and that is going to exist in perpetuity in your organization, you should always be thinking about bringing that in-house. So I would say quality control, quality assurance. What I mean by that is, a testing and quality function relative to software development, relative to the rollout of new versions of SaaS platforms. Even though we rely on our SaaS partners, obviously, to test their product enhancements, new revisions, new versions, there's this application of it on the business side because there's this whole process architecture piece. And so new functionality may be delivered in a SaaS platform, but if it doesn't align with our existing processes and we need to make tweaks in that area, we want to have quality control under the process swim lane as well as the technology and functional swim lane. So quality assurance, quality control. And then another area is I don't think we could ever have enough data scientists and data engineers and BI engineers to satisfy the insatiable need of information and knowledge in our organization. And so that's an area that I would say we would want to devote attention and time to. I brought Greg Frieda on as our enterprise architect, and my vision was that he would have enterprise architects and solution architects one day reporting into his function. And so I think that that's an area that we can add to that would make a strong contribution to our ability to not only manage our existing portfolio of applications, but plan for the future.
And just the final closing question is kind of I like to say the soapbox moment, kind of your closing final thoughts some important life lessons, anything you kind of want to share to tie a bow on this conversation?
Yeah, it's interesting. This has been a 6-year plus journey for me. I only had one other interim CIO role because I was mostly a consultant all of my career, with a few stops here and there, leading enterprise architecture at Mylan, strategic technology at UPMC. And so, in terms of lessons learned, I think my consulting background, people ask me all the time, how can I prepare to be a CIO? Younger people who are just starting their career off, or people in the middle management space, I want to be a CIO. I think my consulting career has served me tremendously in my current role because, as I mentioned, I consider all my business stakeholders clients. And I don't think if you've lived and breathed that life, certainly, I think that you can ultimately arrive at that behavioral aspect of the role. But once you've been in that consulting world and moved from client to client to client and experienced the different personalities, the different communication preferences, I think it gives you a more a approach to these problems and solutions with a more adaptable personality. And I think that's been a very favorable aspect of what my past career has been like in applying that to this existing role. And, a few years ago, as I think we celebrated a milestone within the organization, our CEO gave us a plaque that has some great lessons written on it, but the overall message is sense of urgency. Don't wait to act on something. And I would say that one of my lessons in the last 24 months has been deliberating too much on certain things and not acting more swiftly. And you can get into analysis paralysis. And I'm a thinking person. I don't know what the Myers-Briggs or DISC, EJTN, people say I'm an EJTN or whatever. I don't know what I don't have those memorized, but I will say that I'm certainly a thinking person versus a feeling person. And I think, to use the word,
there it is.
My lesson is to get better at acting with more of a sense of urgency on things, because I think my penchant to want to deliberate more is so I'm more confident in the action or the decision. And especially in 2024, I've changed that approach. So you're always learning no matter where you're at.
I think that's really awesome to hear, namely because you said a whole bunch, but I want to close here. Namely that, we have these personality types, like you said, the Myers-Briggs. And I think sometimes we over-identify, right? It doesn't, having a personality type doesn't mean that is who you are by the book. It also highlights weaknesses that you can work on, like you said. And just because you're thinking by that definition doesn't mean you don't work on trying to, like you said, be more feeling or act with more urgency. And obviously these personality types are just our natural inclination. But above all, it allows us it shows us who we naturally are, but it also encourages us to be more than that. And so I think hearing that and obviously we are in different generations. So to hear from your generation, you're still constantly trying to challenge and learn, is awesome. And I think that is also kind of the name of the game, because I still couldn't come up with a
we'll work on that
phrase of IT. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, if you have any ideas, please just message me. Is IT is a place of learning too. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much for 45 minutes of learning and talking. And I'm glad that you were the first returning guest, and I hope that becomes a staple moving forward. I think there's something really important to hear, not just the one-off conversations that I have, but to hear the progression over time. And you are someone who I consider very wise and very humble at the same time. And I think those two combined leads to a very good conversation, and obviously a very successful career. So Robert, I just want to say thank you again for your time and your expertise. And I'd be glad to have you back whenever you want.
Jethro, always a pleasure. I'll take you up on that. Give me about 6 to 12 months and we'll get back at it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, take care, Robert, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this Keeping IT Real episode, and thank you for listening. Make sure to hit subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. This podcast is all about celebrating and connecting professional heroes who work hard at IT every day. To continue the conversation and learn how VCOM can help you better buy, manage, and pay for your technology, visit us at vcomsolutions.com. Until next time.